The 1960s gave us Psycho, The Graduate, and 2001. But what about the films that were just as brilliant, yet somehow forgotten? You loved our first journey through cinema's lost decade. So we're back with 15 more discoveries that will change how you see film history. The Wicker Man, 1973. Folk horror's burning masterpiece. In a decade filled with iconic horror films, one stands completely apart. A musical mystery set on a remote Scottish island that's often called the Citizen Kane of horror. The Wicker Man is utterly unique and utterly brilliant. Yet when released, the studio butchered it, chopping down the length and dumping it as a B feature. No wonder it took years for audiences to discover its genius. The story follows a devout Christian police sergeant, Edward Woodward, investigating a missing child on an isolated island. He discovers a community living as if pre-Christian times never ended. They sing, dance, and celebrate ancient May Day rituals under Lord Summer Isel's benign leadership, Christopher Lee, in perhaps his finest performance. Lee championed this film with passionate dedication throughout his career, considering it his greatest work, despite being known primarily for his Dracula portrayals. The legendary actor, who served in World War II and spoke multiple languages, was drawn to the film's intelligent exploration of faith and belief systems. As the devout sergeant clashes with the islanders' ancient traditions, the film builds to one of cinema's most unforgettable climaxes. What makes The Wicker Man mesmerizing is its genre-blending brilliance. Part detective story, part musical. The townsfolk break into haunting folk songs, part philosophical debate, and part psychological horror. The original cut was literally lost, making it a lost treasure that fans spent decades trying to restore. Despite initial neglect, The Wicker Man is now acknowledged as a folk horror masterpiece that inspired films like 2019's Midsommar. Its horror doesn't rely on gore or typical scares. It's the slow, creeping kind that burrows into your mind. This is essential viewing that burns as brightly as ever. Peeping Tom, 1960. The slasher that destroyed a career. While Hitchcock's Psycho shocked American audiences, across the Atlantic, one film went even further and paid a devastating price. Peeping Tom is a British thriller about a shy cameraman who harms women and films their final moments. It sounds disturbing, and it is, but it's also a brilliant, ahead of its time, exploration of voyeurism and trauma. Director Michael Powell, previously beloved for lush Technicolor dramas, delivered something so unsettling that critics savaged it mercilessly. They called it sick and perverted, and the backlash essentially ended Powell's career in the UK. The vitriolic reception was so severe that Powell was effectively banished from the British film industry, forcing him to seek work abroad, where he struggled to raise money for projects. Yet today, Peeping Tom is hailed as a masterpiece and proto-slasher classic. Martin Scorsese helped rescue it from obscurity in the late 1970s, recognizing its genius. The film dares to implicate us, the audience, in its voyeuristic thrills. It's chilling, stylish, and psychologically complex beyond what Hollywood was producing. If Psycho explores fear of the unknown threat, Peeping Tom examines fear of the camera itself, and will make you reconsider the act of watching films. Talk about being ahead of its time. The Night of the Hunter, 1955, a fairy tale from hell. Charles Laughton, the celebrated actor, directed only one film, pouring every ounce of creativity into this singular vision. The Night of the Hunter is unlike any other movie from its era. Part horror, part folktale, part fever dream. Robert Mitchum delivers an unforgettable performance as a murderous preacher with love and hate tattooed on his knuckles, hunting two innocent children through a nightmare version of the American South. The film's expressionistic visuals, deep shadows, stark light, make every frame look like a haunting painting. So why was this masterpiece forgotten? In 1955, audiences and critics didn't know what to make of this bizarre lyrical thriller. It failed both critically and financially, earning only $6,030 against a budget of $795,000. Laughton took the failure deeply personally and was so crushed that he abandoned his planned adaptation of Norman Mailer's The Naked and the Dead. The sensitive artist never found courage to direct again. Over decades, cinephiles rediscovered Night of the Hunter and realized it's a flat-out masterpiece. Today, it's considered one of the greatest American films ever made, yet many folks still haven't experienced it. One viewing, and you'll never forget the preacher's eerie hymn echoing in darkness, or the image of a woman in a river, hair flowing like underwater reeds. This is cinematic poetry that was simply too strange for its time. Harold and Maude, 1971, the oddest love story ever told. Hollywood has produced countless romantic comedies, but none quite like Harold and Maude. Imagine a morbid 20-year-old obsessed with staging elaborate fake scenarios, who falls in love with a 79-year-old free-spirited woman. Hal Ashby's dark comedy received mixed reviews and flopped at the box office. Audiences in '71 were perplexed by its blend of macabre humor and heartfelt romance. But like its young hero, the film got a second chance. Through midnight screenings and word of mouth, Harold and Maude became a cult classic, now often cited as one of the greatest comedies ever. The film bursts with life-affirming messages beneath the morbid humor. Harold, Bud Cort, stages elaborate fake scenarios to get attention until he meets Maude, Ruth Gordon, in an iconic role, who teaches him how to truly live. The May-December romance that follows is oddly touching and never exploitative. With a timeless Cat Stevens soundtrack and a philosophy of embracing every moment, Harold and Maude feels as fresh and subversive today as it must have in 1971. It just took the world time to appreciate it. This anti-establishment love story with soul can make you laugh hysterically at staged theatrics 1 minute and cry at a sunflower metaphor the next. THX 1138, 1971, George Lucas's dystopian masterpiece. A young filmmaker named George Lucas made his feature debut with a cerebral, slow-burn science fiction film about a dystopian future where emotions are illegal, everyone is chemically controlled, and people have serial numbers instead of names. It's called THX 1138, and if you've never heard of it, that's because nearly everyone ignored it on release. Despite strong reviews, it was a box office failure. A few years later, Lucas would create Star Wars and change cinema forever. But THX 1138 is like the anti-Star Wars, cold, clinical, and philosophical. The film drops you into an underground city where people in white jumpsuits go through life, devoid of intimacy or individuality. Robert Duvall plays THX 1138, a person who stops taking emotion-suppressing medication and falls in love with LH 3417, Maggie McComie, an act of rebellion in this society. There isn't a traditional plot so much as a sequence of experiences. THX's awakening, punishment in a featureless white void, and an extended escape attempt. Lucas, fresh from film school, was heavily influenced by avant-garde cinema, creating striking imagery and sound design that builds an alienating atmosphere. Modern audiences might recognize its influence in films like Logan's Run, Equilibrium, and The Matrix. While overshadowed by Lucas's later blockbusters, THX 1138 has earned a devoted cult following among sci-fi enthusiasts who appreciate its bold, bleak vision. Fair warning, if you're expecting space opera adventure, adjust expectations. This is more Stanley Kubrick than Steven Spielberg. But for a taste of Lucas at his most experimental, THX 1138 is an eye-opener. Performance, 1970. Identity crisis in swinging London. Take one London gangster on the run, James Fox. Add one reclusive, decadent rock star, Mick Jagger. When this unlikely pair cross paths, identities blur, reality fractures, and the result is Performance. A film so trippy and provocative that the studio delayed its release for 2 years. Shot in 1968, Warner Brothers executives didn't know what to do with it. The movie dives into psychedelia, free love, gender fluidity, and mind games. The film's impact on leading actor James Fox was profound and disturbing. Making Performance, combined with his father's recent passing, caused Fox to have a complete breakdown. The experience was so traumatic that he abandoned acting for 9 years, becoming deeply religious. When Performance finally hit theaters in 1970, many critics were appalled. The New York Times called it loathsome. But over time, it's been recognized as a counterculture gem. This was one of Nicholas Roeg's first directing efforts, co-directed with Donald Cammell, showcasing Roeg's innovative style. fragmented editing, surreal montages, and dreamlike narrative. Mick Jagger, at the height of Rolling Stones fame, gives an eerie performance and sings the hypnotic Memo from Turner in one unforgettable scene. Performance explores how we all wear masks and play roles, sometimes willingly, sometimes under duress, with dazzling cinematic flair. Modern directors still study this film's daring techniques. If, 1968, Rebellion at School, Revolution on Screen, long before The Breakfast Club or Dead Poets Society, one film took a metaphorical Molotov cocktail to the British boarding school system. If, yes, the title ends in ellipses, is Lindsay Anderson's incendiary vision of youth rebellion. It stars young Malcolm McDowell in his debut as Mick Travis, a student fed up with brutal hazing and archaic discipline in a rigid English boarding school. McDowell came from working-class roots in Yorkshire, and his path to this role was anything but typical. After his parents' pub went bankrupt, when his father drank all the profits, Malcolm worked various jobs before finding his way to acting. Anderson cast him partly because of his authentic rebellious spirit. What starts as sharp satire of British conformity slowly builds to an explosive climax as oppressed students stage an uprising against the establishment. When If premiered, it shocked censors and thrilled younger viewers, winning the Palme d'Or at Cannes in 1969. In its home country, parts were censored due to its bold portrayal of conflict in a school setting. Anderson mixes realism with surreal touches. One moment it's slice of life in dorms and chapels. The next it slips into dream-like sequences. Watch for sudden switches from black and white to color. In an era when students worldwide were protesting, If captured that revolutionary spirit. The result is exhilarating, dangerous, and utterly unforgettable. The Boston Strangler, 1968. True crime meets split-screen innovation. In the same year that 2001, A Space Odyssey expanded minds, and Night of the Living Dead spooked drive-ins, another film tackled much more grounded horror, the very recent case of the Boston Strangler. It was bold, perhaps too bold, to make a movie about an active case. The real crimes had just happened years prior. Tony Curtis, famous for light roles, shocked everyone by portraying the disturbed individual at the story's center, while Henry Fonda played the investigator trying to crack the case. Director Richard Fleischer used innovative techniques, notably split-screen mosaics in many scenes, to show multiple perspectives simultaneously, ratcheting up tension. Fleischer was establishing himself as a master of diverse genres, but The Boston Strangler represented his boldest technical experimentation, pioneering split-screen techniques that would influence thrillers for decades. The result is a sleek, nerve-jangling thriller, ahead of its time technically. But in 1968, many people were uneasy about it. Boston authorities and locals opposed production, understandably, since wounds were fresh. Critics were mixed. Roger Ebert praised the craft, but questioned whether such a well-made film about real, gruesome events was morally defensible. Despite controversy, The Boston Strangler has been re-evaluated as a gripping crime drama with a strong cult following. The split-screen sequences have been imitated in countless thrillers since. Tony Curtis gives arguably the performance of his career, utterly casting off his matinee idol image. This is a bridge between old-school procedural dramas and more graphic true crime films to come. The Long Goodbye, 1973. Noir gets a 1970s makeover. Detective Philip Marlowe, the hard-boiled private eye from Raymond Chandler's novels, is typically associated with the 1940s, trench coats, and fedoras. But in Robert Altman's hands, Marlowe was reborn in the neon haze of 1970s Los Angeles. Played with rambling, mumbling charm by Elliot Gould, this film is a deconstruction of film noir. And back in '73, audiences didn't quite know what to make of it. Released with little fanfare, it was a critical and commercial flop, barely earning back half its small budget. Gould brought his own experience of professional exile to the role. After his divorce from Barbara Streisand and some career missteps, he had been virtually unemployable in Hollywood. By the time Altman cast him, Gould had been forced to take humiliating psychiatric evaluations just to get work. But like many Altman films, The Long Goodbye aged like fine wine. Today it's heralded as one of the great cult neo-noirs of the 1970s. Sly, cynical, and darkly funny. The plot involves Marlowe trying to clear a friend accused of wrongdoing, leading him into deception involving a missing wife, a Hemingway-esque writer, and a menacing gangster. But plot is secondary. Mood is everything. The 1970s L.A. portrayed here is sun-drenched but spiritually bleak, a place where a moral person like Marlowe is treated as an oddball. Gould's performance is brilliant. He's quippy but melancholic, shuffling through a world that's okay with everything, in that laid-back 70s way. Many modern directors, the Coen brothers for example, owe a debt to The Long Goodbye for showing how to honor and satirize a genre simultaneously. Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, 1969, swinging 60s, suburban style. The title sounds like four ordinary folks, and that's the point. Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice introduces us to two average upscale couples navigating the era of free love and open-minded experimentation. This comedy drama, directed by Paul Mazursky, came out just as the 60s ended, holding up a mirror to changing morals of the time. Mazursky drew from personal experience for this exploration of changing relationships. He and writing partner Larry Tucker were inspired by an article about Gestalt therapy, but the film's authentic portrayal of marital tensions came from Mazursky's own observations of how counterculture was affecting middle-class marriages. Bob and Carol, Robert Culp and Natalie Wood, return from a hip group therapy retreat in California and decide to embrace total honesty, including extramarital relationships. Straight-laced friends Ted and Alice, Elliot Gould and Diane Cannon, are shocked till they start questioning their own inhibitions. The film was a box office success, grossing over $31 million on a $2 million budget, though it received mixed critical reception. It was considered daring in its day. Characters openly discuss unconventional arrangements, yet treats its subjects with warmth rather than cheap titillation. The final scene, set to "What the World Needs Now Is Love," is a delightful twist that underscores the film's message about connection. Elliot Gould was going through his own personal struggles during this period. His marriage to Barbara Streisand was unraveling, and he later admitted to battling depression. His performance captures someone trying to find their place in a changing world. If you want to see how the summer of love crashed into the American middle class, spend an evening with Bob, Carol, Ted, and Alice. Pretty Poison, 1968. The Dark Side of Young Love. Don't let the innocuous title fool you. Pretty Poison is a sharp little thriller with a wicked sense of humor. It flew under the radar in '68, opening with barely any promotion and being dumped by 20th Century Fox, who had little faith in it. Sure enough, it went largely unnoticed by moviegoers, though a few critics saw its brilliance. The film stars Anthony Perkins, yes, Norman Bates himself, as Dennis, a quirky young person just out of a mental institution who has trouble distinguishing fantasy from reality. Perkins brought his own struggles with identity to the role. The actor was privately grappling with personal issues and would later face health challenges that he kept secret, terrified that disclosure would end his career. He meets Sue Ann, a seemingly sweet all-American high school girl, played by Tuesday Weld. Weld came to this role carrying extraordinary childhood weight. After her father passed when she was 4, she became her family's breadwinner by age 9, suffered a nervous breakdown the same year, and had been struggling since age 10. When offered the title role in Kubrick's Lolita, she famously declined, saying, "I didn't have to play it. I was Lolita." Eager to impress, Dennis pretends to be a secret CIA agent and draws Sue Ann into his delusional missions, like sabotaging a local factory. Sounds like a cute comedic setup, except Sue Ann turns out to have a real taste for mayhem, and the story takes twisted turns. What makes Pretty Poison shine is the chemistry between Perkins and Weld. Perkins gives Dennis nervous, sympathetic energy. You feel sorry for this oddball. Weld gradually reveals the manipulative sociopath under her character's bubbly exterior. The film's tone walks a tightrope between dark comedy and suspense, with satirical edge poking at suburban wholesomeness. This is a hidden gem, as sweet and dangerous as its title. Alice's Restaurant, 1969. The hippie ode to getting nothing you want? Let's include something lighter, though still firmly nonconformist. Alice's Restaurant is a rambling, very 1960s comedy drama that captures an era's spirit through one Shaggy Dog story. It's based on the famous 18-minute talking blues song by folk singer Arlo Guthrie, son of Woody, and Arlo plays himself in the film. The tale, in both song and movie, starts with a trivial crime, Arlo littering on Thanksgiving, and spins into an absurd saga touching on the Vietnam draft, commune life, and generational divide. Directed by Arthur Penn, right after Bonnie and Clyde, the film has loose, episodic structure. It's like flipping through a scrapbook of late 60s counterculture moments. Hippies renovating a deconsecrated church into a commune, a memorable massacre of garbage, a surreal sequence at the Army Induction Center where Arlo's crime actually keeps him out of Vietnam. When Alice's Restaurant hit theaters, it got mixed reception. Middle America didn't quite get its meandering style, but young people embraced it. What makes it special is authenticity. Many real-life figures from Arlo's song appear as themselves. Police Chief Officer Obi literally plays himself. This gives the film a semi-documentary vibe. Alice's Restaurant might not be plot-driven. It's as rambling as a hippie monologue, but that's its charm. It invites you to hang out in its world, have a laugh, feel nostalgia for a time when you really could get anything you want at Alice's Restaurant. If you want pure 60s vibe in its mildly anarchic, hard-on-sleeve form, pull up a chair. Carnival of Souls, 1962. The low-budget nightmare that won't rest. Sometimes the creepiest films come from nowhere. Carnival of Souls was made by a tiny crew in Kansas on a shoestring budget of $33,000, starring unknown actors. And upon release, it practically sank without a ripple. But like the undead organist at its center, the film would not stay buried. It found new life on late-night TV and became a cult classic, influencing horror masters like George Romero and David Lynch. So what makes it special? Carnival of Souls is a masterclass in atmosphere. The story follows Mary, a young woman who survives a car accident, or does she? And then is haunted by a ghoulish, pale-faced figure. She's drawn to an abandoned lakeside pavilion, and the movie builds dread like few others. Director Herc Harvey uses stark black and white cinematography and an eerie organ score to create otherworldly isolation. There are no jump scares, no gore, just mounting wrongness and doom. Modern viewers might recognize its DNA. George Romero cited it as inspiration for Night of the Living Dead, and you can see shades in Lynch's uncanny imagery. At the time, audiences didn't know what to make of its slow, dreamlike pace. Now it's rightly praised for artistry. If you're a fan of psychological horror and haven't seen this one, do yourself a favor. Just maybe don't watch it right before bed. The Honeymoon Killers, 1969. Love hurts and destroys. Forget the romantic title. The Honeymoon Killers is as far from a honeymoon as you can get. This gritty, low-budget crime drama is based on the true story of the Lonely Hearts criminals, Martha Beck and Raymond Fernandez, who in the 1940s would pose as brother and sister to lure unsuspecting women via personal ads, then rob and harm them. Shot in black and white and directed by Leonard Castle, The Honeymoon Killers feels like a tabloid crime story brought to life. Castle took over directing duties after Martin Scorsese was fired from the project after just 1 week for shooting too slowly, an early hint at Scorsese's perfectionist tendencies. Shirley Stoller plays Martha as a lonely, jealous nurse who falls for Ray, Tony Lobianco, a slick con artist. Instead of Hollywood beautiful criminals, these two look and act like real people, desperate, manipulative, sometimes pathetic, sometimes chilling. The film doesn't romanticize them at all. You won't exactly root for Martha and Ray, but you won't be able to look away either. Despite, or because of, its rough edges, the film has gained a devoted cult following for its raw power. It's like watching a crime scene unfold without Hollywood polish. The Honeymoon Killers pulls no punches in its unflinching true crime approach. 2,000 Maniacs, 1964. Gore pioneer in the Deep South. The horror genre has its classy fright fests. And then it has Herschel Gordon Lewis, the godfather of gore, who gleefully threw buckets of blood at screens in the 60s. Before becoming the pioneer of splatter films, he was actually a college professor and advertising executive. His crowning achievement? 2,000 Maniacs, a film as outrageous as its exclamation mark. The premise: a group of Yankee tourists stumble into a small southern town secretly celebrating the Civil War centennial by harming Northerners in gruesome ways. It's part horror, part dark comedy, and 100% drive-in grindhouse. We're talking low-budget practical gore effects. Think barbecues and barrel rolls used for dangerous purposes. Critics in '64 were horrified for all the wrong reasons. This was considered trash, beneath contempt. But Lewis knew what he was doing. He was basically inventing the splatter genre. 2,000 Maniacs was among the first films to introduce over-the-top gore and hicksploitation horror, dangerous backwoods folk dishing out country justice. If that sounds like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you're spot on. Tobe Hooper and others were influenced by this concept. Today, it's pure cult delight for horror fans who appreciate campy violence. The acting is amateur and budget near zero, but there's unsettling satirical undercurrent. Those smiling Southerners cheerfully committing atrocities. 2,000 Maniacs is definitely not for everyone. But if you enjoy Evil Dead or Grindhouse, you owe a nod to this bloody 60s trailblazer that practically invented the gore fest. That's 15 more overlooked gems from the 1960s and early 70s, proving how endlessly rich that era of cinema was. These films were born in a time of great social change and artistic experimentation, and each one, in its own way, broke rules or tried something bold. Some were punished for it, at least initially, with harsh reviews or poor ticket sales, only to be vindicated by history. Others simply slipped through the cracks, overshadowed by bigger hits, waiting decades for rediscovery. But, as we've seen, quality wins in the end. Many of today's revered classics and filmmakers owe a debt to these once-forgotten works. So next time you're in the mood for something off the beaten path, give one of these a try. Whether it's the chilling voyeurism of Peeping Tom, the satirical rebellion of If, or the haunting melodies of the Wicker Man, you'll find that these films still have power to surprise, shock, and inspire. They might not have been box office champions, but in the marathon of cinematic legacy, they're still in the race, influencing new generations of artists and viewers. If this journey through overlooked classics sparked your interest, subscribe and ring that bell. We're always digging up buried cinematic treasure. Drop a comment about which film surprised you most, or share your own hidden gem discovery. Until next time, keep exploring the roads less traveled in cinema.